The laughter started small, a chuckle from my brother. Then it spread around the backyard like wildfire. Plates clinked, drinks were lifted, and every eye seemed to turn toward me. I stood there at the barbecue, holding a paper plate that suddenly felt heavier than bricks. My cousin had just repeated what my brother said loud enough for everyone to hear. Daniel's still working that little delivery job. Imagine going to college and ending up like that. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. They laughed again, this time louder, like it was the funniest thing they had heard all week. Even my father smirked, shaking his head as though I were a child who hadn't learned his lesson. My sisters whispered into each other's ears, covering their mouths, but their eyes darted toward me. Someone clapped me on the back, pretending it was all in good fun, but I could feel the cruelty underneath. It wasn't just the job they laughed at. My brother added more fuel. And don't forget the breakup. She left him faster than you can say failure. The crowd roared. My chest tightened. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. My face burned, but I forced myself not to look away. I tried to chew the food on my plate, but it tasted like ash. My hands shook slightly as I gripped the fork. Around me, uncles, aunts, cousins, people who had seen me grow up, were now treating me like a joke. My mother sat quietly, pretending to adjust the salad bowl, avoiding my eyes. She never spoke up when it came to me. My father leaned back in his chair, proud of the laughter, almost proud that I was the center of it. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, but my throat felt locked. Words piled up in my chest but refused to leave. So I sat there, smiling faintly as though I didn't care, pretending their words slid off me like rain on glass. Inside, though, I was bleeding. Every laugh was a knife, every glance a reminder of how small they thought I was. But in the middle of the noise, I felt something shift. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my plate or storm out. I just sat straighter and looked at each of them, one by one. I let their laughter wash over me, but behind my silence, a fire started to grow. I wasn't going to forget this moment. Not the taste of humiliation, not the smirk on my father's face, not the way my brother raised his glass to toast to my failures. I forced myself to keep calm, but my eyes must have told a different story. Because when I finally looked up, I noticed my cousin's smile falter for just a second, as if he saw something in me that the others missed. I wasn't broken. I wasn't finished. That night, I would go home in silence, but in my silence was a promise. They thought they had laughed at the end of my story. They didn't know. It was only the beginning. Daniel Carter was 32 years old, but most days he felt much older. Life had pressed down on him in ways he didn't expect. He was hardworking, always had been, but no matter how much effort he put in, it seemed like people, especially his own family, never saw him for who he truly was. To them, he was the one who tried and failed, the one who never quite measured up. Growing up, Daniel's father ruled the house with a heavy hand. His father believed success meant power, money, and respect from others, and he demanded the same from his children. Daniel's older brother fit that image perfectly. Strong, loud, confident, the kind of man who could charm people at a party and walk into a room like he owned it. His sisters were no different, polished, successful in their own ways, and always eager to brag about it. But Daniel was different. He was quieter, softer in spirit, someone who preferred books to arguments, someone who tried to build things carefully rather than force them into shape. For that, his father often dismissed him, saying, "You're too soft, Daniel. You'll never make it in this world with that attitude." His mother never defended him. She loved him in her quiet way, bringing him food when he stayed up late studying or slipping a little cash into his pocket when he was broke. But when his father criticized him, she stayed silent. Her silence cut deeper than the words. It felt like she agreed with his father, or worse, that Daniel wasn't worth speaking up for. Daniel tried to prove himself. After college, he started a small business with every bit of savings he had. It was a delivery service, something he believed could grow. For a while it looked like it might work. He worked long nights, skipped meals, and poured his heart into it. But when the economy shifted, the business crashed. He lost everything, his money, his confidence, and most painfully, the respect of the family who never believed in him in the first place. His father called it a lesson. His brother laughed. "Should have known you'd fall flat," he said. The failure left scars. It wasn't just about the business. It was about how Daniel began to see himself. He started to believe maybe his family was right. Maybe he wasn't meant to be more than the shadow in the room. At the same time, the woman he thought he'd build a life with left him. She said she needed stability, that she couldn't keep waiting for him to figure things out. Her leaving wasn't cruel, but it was final, and it broke something inside him. Now, in his early 30s, Daniel worked a modest job making deliveries for a local company. The pay wasn't great, the hours were long, but it was steady. He woke up early, drove through traffic, carried packages up long staircases, and ended his days tired but oddly grateful to at least be standing on his own 2 feet. To outsiders, it might have looked like he was stuck. But for Daniel, it was survival, a way to keep moving even if the steps were small. His family, though, never saw it that way. At every gathering, they found ways to remind him he hadn't measured up. His brother boasted about new deals, his sisters flaunted their accomplishments, and his father compared him to every successful cousin or neighbor he knew. Daniel often sat in the corner, eating quietly, waiting for the day to end. Each word they spoke about him pushed him deeper into himself. Still, he never stopped trying, even if it was in silence. Inside, Daniel longed for something simple, not riches or fame, but respect. He wanted dignity, to stand in a room with his family and not feel like the smallest person there. He wanted freedom from the shadow of his father's voice, freedom from the memory of failure that clung to him, freedom from the shame that had followed him like a second skin. He dreamed of rebuilding his life, brick by brick. Maybe not in ways they would ever understand, but in ways that mattered to him. Even when the nights were long and his paycheck felt too small, he told himself that as long as he kept moving, something would change. That was why the laughter at the barbecue cut so deeply. It wasn't just about the jokes or the humiliation in front of cousins and neighbors. It was about years of being overlooked, years of being treated like a disappointment, years of carrying failure on his shoulders without anyone seeing how hard he was fighting to stand. That night, as he drove home after the barbecue, the thought repeated in his head like a drumbeat. He wanted more than survival. He wanted to be free. The smoke from the grill hung heavy in the air, mixing with the chatter of cousins and the sound of music playing from a speaker. Daniel sat at the edge of the group, eating slowly, hoping the night would pass without more jabs. But his brother never let an opportunity slip. With a beer in his hand and a wide grin, he raised his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know what Daniel told me last week?" he began, already smirking. Heads turned. His brother thrived on being the center of attention. He said he's behind on rent again. Can you imagine? 32 years old, and still can't keep up with the basics. The crowd erupted in laughter. Some shook their heads, some whispered. Others clapped their hands like it was the funniest thing. Daniel froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. That was something he had shared privately. Hearing it thrown out like a joke was like being stripped bare in front of the whole family. His brother wasn't finished. And get this, he's been driving that old delivery van that breaks down every other week. I swear, if you ever need an exercise program, just follow Daniel around while he pushes that thing uphill. More laughter. Daniel's cousins bent over with amusement, nearly choking on their food. His sisters giggled, their polished nails covering their mouths. Daniel swallowed hard. He wanted to disappear. He looked at his mother, hoping for some sign of protection, but she just kept rearranging the food on the table, pretending not to hear. His father sat back in his chair, arms crossed, watching. Then, with a voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the noise, his father spoke. "You'll never be anything, Daniel. Not if you keep living like this." The laughter stopped for a moment, almost like everyone was waiting for Daniel to react. But he didn't. He couldn't. His chest felt heavy, his heart pounding so hard it echoed in his ears. He tried to take a breath, but the words stuck like stones inside him. He could have fought back. He could have shouted, thrown his plate, demanded respect. Instead, he placed his fork down, folded his napkin carefully, and stood. His brother called after him, "Hey, don't be so sensitive. We're just joking." But Daniel didn't turn. He walked out of the backyard, past the rows of chairs and tables, past the laughter that rose again behind him, and kept walking until he reached his car. The drive home was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your skin. He kept seeing their faces, the way they had laughed without hesitation. His father's voice repeated in his head, "You'll never be anything." It felt final, like a stamp on his life. Yet, somewhere deep inside, another voice whispered that maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it could be the start. When he reached his small apartment, Daniel didn't switch on the light right away. He sat in the dark, breathing slowly, letting the silence wrap around him. He didn't cry. He didn't break. He just sat, his mind replaying the night like a broken record. Then, just past midnight, his phone buzzed. He almost ignored it, thinking it was one of his cousins sending a meme. But when he looked, it wasn't. It was an email. He opened it, eyes scanning the words carefully. A company he had applied to weeks ago, something bigger than deliveries, something that matched his skills, was inviting him for an interview. His heart skipped. He read it again, making sure it was real. It wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't success handed to him, but it was a door he hadn't expected to open. He sat there staring at the screen, remembering the laughter, the mocking voices, the disappointment in his father's tone. And then he remembered how it felt when he stood up and left, not weak, but calm, choosing silence over shouting. That night, he made a quiet decision. He wouldn't rise to prove them wrong. He wouldn't live his life just to throw his success in their faces. He would rise for himself, for the boy who grew up being compared to everyone else, for the man who had tried, failed, and still kept going, for the person inside him who deserved dignity, The morning of the interview, Daniel woke up before dawn. His small apartment was quiet, the walls thin enough to hear his neighbors moving around, but inside his place it was just him and his thoughts. He pressed his one good shirt, polished his shoes until they shone, and stood in front of the mirror practicing his answers. His reflection stared back at him, tired but determined. For the first time in years, he felt like maybe he had a chance to climb out of the hole he'd been stuck in. The interview went better than he expected. He spoke clearly, explained his ideas, and listened carefully. When he walked out of the building, the city air felt lighter. A week later, the email came, "We'd like to bring you on board." Daniel sat at his kitchen table staring at the screen, barely able to believe it. It wasn't the highest-paying job in the world, but it was steady, professional, and most importantly, a step forward. From that moment, he threw himself into the work. He stayed late in the office, studied things he didn't understand, and volunteered for projects others didn't want. He was the first one in, and the last to leave, determined not to waste the chance. He lived simply, no parties, no extra spending. Every night when exhaustion hit him, he thought of the barbecue, the laughter, his father's voice saying he would never be anything. That memory became fuel. But some nights, when the work piled high and his body ached, doubt crept back in. He remembered all the other times he had tried and failed. His failed business haunted him. His ex-girlfriend's words echoed, "I can't wait forever for you to get it together." Sometimes he would put his head down on his desk and wonder if his family was right, if he was only delaying another disaster. In those moments, childhood memories returned like shadows. He remembered being 10 years old, standing on a soccer field, missing a goal, and hearing his father sigh in disappointment while his brother shouted from the sideline, "Of course Daniel missed. It's Daniel." The other kids laughed. He remembered being 15, bringing home a report card with good grades, but hearing his father ask why his brother had scored higher. He remembered birthdays where his siblings' achievements were praised while his own gifts were treated like afterthoughts. It was a lifetime of being compared, mocked, and pushed aside. Those memories could have broken him, but instead they hardened into something else, quiet strength. He told himself, "Not this time. I will not fail this time." Meanwhile, his family carried on as if nothing had changed. At dinners and gatherings, they spoke about him in half-jokes. "Daniel's probably still chasing delivery," his brother would say. His sisters rolled their eyes when his name came up. His father didn't even bother asking what Daniel was doing. He assumed he already knew the answer. They didn't realize that while they mocked him, Daniel was slowly building something stronger than they could imagine. The months stretched on. Daniel's hard work began to show results. His bosses noticed him. He was given larger projects, trusted with decisions. The more he pushed, the more doors opened. But the pressure was heavy. Every mistake felt like it might drag him back to the life he was running from. One bad day, one bad choice, and it would all come crashing down. He lived in that fear, carrying it on his back, sweating through every task. One night, after a long shift, he came home so tired he collapsed onto the couch without eating. He stared at the ceiling, wondering if it was worth it, if he was simply burning himself out for nothing. He thought about quitting. The image of his family laughing at him at the barbecue came back so vividly that it made his chest tighten. He saw his brother raising his glass, his father's dismissive eyes, his cousins laughing until their sides hurt. That humiliation burned hotter than the doubt. He sat up, clenched his fists, and whispered to himself, "I can't let them be right." That became his rhythm. Every time he thought of quitting, he went back to that night. Every time the work became too heavy, he remembered the look on their faces. Their laughter became his fire. Still, he knew the risk. He had failed before, and the fear of failure lived in his bones. It whispered to him at night, reminding him of how everything had fallen apart in the past. But the difference now was that he wasn't working for their approval. He wasn't chasing their respect anymore. This time, he was building something for himself. And yet, the tension only grew. With each small success came a bigger challenge, a bigger chance to fail. He carried the weight alone. His family didn't know. To them, he was still the struggling Daniel, still the disappointment. They gossiped, they joked, they carried on as if nothing about him could ever change. But Daniel was changing. Every late night, every early morning, every time he forced himself to keep going when his body screamed to stop, he was carving out a new life. One they wouldn't see until it was too late. He didn't know how long it would take or if he would truly succeed. The question hung over him every day. Will I rise this time, or will I fall again and prove them right? That question was both his burden and his fuel. And it carried him forward, step by step, into the storm that was waiting for him. The next family gathering came months later. It was another barbecue, same backyard, same tables, same laughter floating through the evening air. But for Daniel, everything was different. He had spent months working harder than he ever thought possible, pushing himself past exhaustion, proving himself again and again until his bosses trusted him with the kind of project that could change a career. And he had done it. He had landed a massive contract for his company, one so big that his name was now being spoken with respect in rooms he never thought he would enter. Still, his family knew none of it. To them, he was still the Daniel who barely scraped by, the brother who failed at business, the son who would never be anything. As he pulled up to the house in a clean, newer car, paid for with his own money, his stomach twisted. He hadn't come to boast. He hadn't come for revenge. He had simply come to stand there as himself, without shame. When he walked into the backyard, heads turned. His brother smirked. Well, look who decided to show up. Didn't think you could afford gas to get here. The laughter started again, familiar and sharp. His sisters whispered something and giggled. His father didn't even look up from his plate. Daniel didn't flinch. He wore a simple but well-fitted shirt, his shoulders straight, his eyes calm. He greeted everyone politely, shook hands, and sat down. The family carried on, joking, telling stories, slipping in comments about him as though he wasn't there. But there was a shift they didn't notice. He wasn't shrinking into his chair this time. He wasn't biting his lip or looking for a way out. He was steady, watching, waiting. The evening went on until his brother, as usual, decided to put him on the spot. So, Daniel, he said loudly, raising his glass, what's new with you? Still running after packages? Or maybe you've upgraded to delivering pizza. More laughter followed, spilling out across the yard. Daniel smiled, but it wasn't the nervous smile they were used to. It was calm, measured. He set his glass down and looked around the table, meeting each set of eyes one by one. Actually, he said softly, things have changed. The laughter quieted a little, unsure. He continued, I've been working on a project these past months. It wasn't easy, but last week I closed a deal, one of the biggest contracts my company has ever signed. They promoted me. I'm leading the division now. Silence. For a moment, all you could hear was the crackle of the grill. His brother's grin faltered. His sisters blinked. His father finally looked up, fork frozen in his hand. And one more thing, Daniel added, his voice steady. You remember the house we used to drive past? The one Dad used to say I could never afford, even in my dreams. He paused, letting the words sink in. I bought it. It's mine now. The shock rippled across the table. His brother laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but Daniel didn't laugh with him. His sisters exchanged stunned looks. His mother's hands trembled slightly as she set down her cup. His father stared, his jaw tight, eyes locked on Daniel. You, his father said finally, his voice heavy. You bought that house? Yes, Daniel said simply. Me. The weight of the moment settled over them. The same family that once mocked him into silence now sat speechless. His brother tried to recover, forced a laugh, and said, Well, I guess miracles happen. But his voice cracked, and the confidence he always carried seemed to slip away. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He just looked around at them all and said, I worked for it. Every late night, every early morning, every bit of doubt, I faced it all. And I made it through. For once, no one laughed. His father leaned back slowly, his face pale. His mother blinked quickly, as if holding back tears. His cousins whispered, but the usual mockery was gone. The power in the room had shifted. Daniel wasn't the joke anymore. He wasn't the quiet shadow sitting at the edge of the table. He was standing in front of them, calm, confident, and unshaken. The silence stretched long enough for Daniel to finish his drink. He stood, not angrily, not with pride, but with peace. I didn't come here to prove anything, he said finally. I just came to show you that I know who I am now. And I don't need anyone's permission to live with dignity. His father's jaw tightened, his lips parting like he wanted to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, Daniel watched his father speechless, and it felt like the ground itself had shifted beneath them all. Would you like me to make Daniel's achievement the house purchase as written, or would you rather I build the climax around his business success alone, like him secretly becoming his brother's competitor and revealing it at the table? The air around the table was thick. For the first time in years, no one had a clever comment ready for Daniel. They were used to laughing at him, to dismissing him as the weak link. But now he stood in front of them calm, steady, and untouchable. He didn't raise his voice, didn't smirk, didn't throw their words back at them. He simply let the truth sit in the open, and it was louder than any laughter they had ever thrown at him. His brother leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed, as if searching for a flaw in Daniel's story. His sisters looked down at their plates, embarrassed, unsure what to say. His father, the man who had told him over and over that he would never be anything, kept his arms crossed, but his face betrayed something Daniel had never seen before, doubt. Only his mother's eyes softened. She blinked fast, her lips pressed together like she was holding back tears. She still didn't say much, but her gaze followed him, proud in a quiet way. Daniel looked around, taking in the scene. A strange calm washed over him. For years, he had imagined this moment as a battle, a chance to finally throw their words back in their faces. But standing there now, he realized he didn't need to fight them. He didn't need their approval. He didn't even need their apology. He had already won, not because of the house or the job, but because he had freed himself from the weight of their judgment. "I'm not here to shame anyone," Daniel said gently. "I just wanted you to know I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. And the truth is, I don't need anyone here to tell me who I am anymore." His brother scoffed under his breath, trying to recover his confidence, but it sounded weak. His sisters shifted uncomfortably. One of them muttered, "Good for you, Daniel," though her voice carried both envy and regret. But his youngest sister, who had always been quieter than the others, looked at him different. She smiled, small but genuine, and said, "I'm proud of you." Those words settled on him like balm. They weren't loud, they weren't dramatic, but they were real. Daniel nodded, offering her a smile back. He finished his drink, stood straighter, and looked toward his father. For a moment, he thought his father might finally say something kind, but the old man only pressed his lips tighter, his pride too heavy to set down. And that was okay. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt peace in his father's silence. He didn't need the man's approval anymore. He didn't need to keep fighting for scraps of respect. He had already given it to himself. He turned toward the group, his voice calm. "I wish all of you well. Truly. I just want you to know that I'm not the same person you laughed at before, and I never will be again." With that, Daniel stepped away from the table. He didn't storm off, didn't slam a door, didn't demand apologies. He simply walked away, carrying himself with quiet dignity. The family watched him go, each of them processing the shift in their own way. Some ashamed, some jealous, some proud, and one man completely undone by the truth that his son had risen without his help. As Daniel reached his car, he breathed deeply. The night was cool, the stars sharp in the sky. For the first time in a long time, he felt light, as if he had set down a burden he'd carried his whole life. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. He didn't need to fight for their respect. He was free. And that freedom was